Hi everyone, it's Lauren, and today I'm going to be talking to you about all of the books that I have read since I last did a wrap up on my channel. So that includes all of the books that I've been reading in this hiatus while I've been on maternity leave, and also some books I read in December. I was looking back through my old videos to see where I last reviewed. And it was in November, so there's actually quite a few books that I've read and not spoken about on this channel at all. So this could be quite interesting. A lot of these books I read a long while ago and I'm a bit like, can I remember anything about those? So I'm going to treat this half as a kind of yearly wrap up video where we actually do talk about some of the books that I enjoyed, and a half maybe just bringing us up to speed so that I feel like, oh, at least I've ticked off those books. I haven't prepared any of my answers for this, by the way. I just have all the books here and I haven't thought about what I'm going to say, so this could be quite interesting. The first one I have is House of Correction by Nikki French, which I read back in December. This is my first Nikki French book. It's a husband and wife writing team and they do lots of suspenseful thrillers, and this was the most recent one. I think I got sent this as a review copy, and this is about a woman who gets put in prison when her neighbour gets murdered, and it sort of comes out that they have a history together. He was her teacher at school, and it looks very much like she's the only person who could have murdered him. They both lived in this small village. There's a bit of CCTV up the lane and only a few people went up and down the lane and all that kind of thing, but she knows, or she thinks she knows, that she didn't kill him. She is a very unreliable person. She's got an unreliable memory. I think she might be an alcoholic, but she's at least dealing with a lot of demons and has kind of blackout situations. So she can't really remember if she killed him or not, but she just doesn't think she did, and she sets about trying to defend herself and find out who really killed him from prison. So this was really fun and very stressful. But the thing I found the most stressful was that this woman had decided to represent herself, and she had no idea about anything you had to do in a legal situation, like how to, I don't know, like look at the evidence, what evidence she's allowed to look at, like how she can go back to what the prosecution is saying and all these other like legal technical things. Like I felt as stressed out as if I was doing it myself, and as I have just displayed, I've got no idea how you defend yourself in a legal case, and I just couldn't believe she was doing it. That's the thing I felt like most upset about. Like I was sitting an exam and I hadn't prepared. I was just so agog that this woman could contemplate doing that. I thought it was a great introduction to Nikki French. I really enjoyed it. I would like to read more of their work now. I know Jen Campbell reads a lot of their books, so yeah, I think this was a great introduction. It's just I think I read it in like 2 days because I just got I had to find out like how it was going to resolve, going through gathering evidence and going through the trial. I just was like, oh my goodness, I need to get to the end of this. It was just really, really making my heart go. But from a more administrative perspective, rather than someone's going to murder me perspective. The next book I read, which you might remember if you watched my November wrap up, because I just watched it just now and I mentioned this book. So that's the first test question for everybody. Like, can you remember like nearly a year ago? But it was Brooklyn by Colin Devine. And this was fine. I really wasn't sure about this book. This is about a young girl from Ireland who goes to New York. And it's kind of about her experience in New York as an immigrant, getting a job there and being part of the Irish community in New York, in Brooklyn, as it happens. And then her going home. There's just a relationship with being at home and being in Brooklyn. But I really didn't understand where this book thought it was going for a very long time. I can see, having read it, how this could be a very good film. She kind of starts dating someone in New York, and there's also like ties back home. So there's a bit of like, will she stay in Brooklyn? Will she go back to Ireland? But the way the actual book paced that and the way it handled it, I just didn't understand where the plot points were. It just felt like a series of events that was happening in her life. I think somebody dies. Well done, Lauren. Maybe her father dies or something happens where she's like, right, I'm gonna have to leave now. So she gets on the boat, and then we're like, oh, this is what it's like on the boat. And then she gets to New York, and this is what it's like in New York. And then she meets this person, and then she gets a job. And it just sort of goes on and on and on. And I was a bit confused as to where the sort of story arc was meant to take me. And quite a lot of things happened right at the end, which at that point, I didn't really care for any of the characters. So I didn't really care whether she stayed or left. Like I wasn't invested because I didn't feel like it rose to occasion in the way that it should have done. But I can see how this would have made a good film, because you could just change the pacing and change the emphasis, and then maybe it would be really good. It was interesting. I enjoyed reading about the experience, but it just felt more like I was reading non-fiction, like a statement of facts, than actually a story. Next we have a little novella which I was so disappointed by and I really wanted to like, which was Mangoes and Mistletoe by Adrianna Herrera. I read this on my Kindle. It was like 150, 200 pages long. It's something very, very short, and I didn't even finish it, so that does not bode well. From the outset, I thought it sounded great. It's a kind of bake-off style TV show that's being filmed in Edinburgh, and there's people from all over the world, and there's two women who are on this bake-off show. Both of them are Dominican, or they have Dominican heritage at least, and they fall in love during this baking show. So I thought, oh, that's nice, like a kind of queer love story. But I can't even remember why I didn't like it. I just found it really boring. I feel like both characters had so much going on for a novella. Like, there were all so much character development, so much plot points, and they'd be like, oh, this is happening with my mum back home, and this is happening with me, and yet it all kind of just stopped, and so most of the pages were dedicated to them having sex. That's what I remember. I don't know if I've got that right, but I remember just thinking, what is happening? Like, you're throwing everything at this short story, and yet nothing is sticking and it's going nowhere, and I just found it really boring, and I wanted to like it. So, shame. That was a Christmas disappointment. Another disappointment was Killing Commendatory by Haruki Murakami. I read this, I say read, for my book club that I have with some women down my road, and so this wasn't my pick. And I've never read, actually have I read Murakami? Yes, I think I read Sputnik Sweetheart, which was fine, but I've not read any of his big chunky works, so I thought, yeah, okay, I wouldn't have picked that up, and I just, it was so boring. It's so boring. I just didn't know where it was going. Oh my goodness, I can't even be bothered to explain it to you. It was like a man who has got divorced, and then he's working in this house which used to belong to this famous artist, and he's an artist as well, and then he finds this painting that this artist did, and then he's going to paint a portrait of a rich man who lives opposite him. And how far through did I get? I want to say, like, I normally give something a good 100 pages before I give up on it. So I got fairly far through. And then we started going down this, I guess, magical realism. Maybe it was more fantasy, where, like, there's a monk living underneath his house who's been there for hundreds of years, and he's like ringing a bell or something, and it started getting weird. But by that point, I was just like, I have spent so much time and nothing has happened, and I just can't be bothered. So yeah, I didn't get much further with that. Next, a book which I wish I could remember more of, and I wish I had reviewed at the time when I read it, because I have actually quite a lot of complex feelings about it, which now I've forgotten, and that was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. It's my first Elizabeth Acevedo, and this is a novel in verse, or I guess a series of poems, but it feels more continuous than that. And it's about two girls, one living in Dominican Republic. I was like, better get this right. And one who lives in New York, and they have the same father, and the family in the Dominican Republic is basically his secret family, and the girls do not know about each other. He spent various time living between the two locations, and then he dies in a plane crash, and it all kind of comes out. And what I really loved about this was how the girls were kind of unraveling their emotions and picking through their grief, and when someone you love so much dies, but then you find out that they've been lying to you, and perhaps lying to your mother or lying to other parts of your family and betraying you. That's really difficult to find out after someone's died, because you can never really confront them with it. And then your grief is kind of mingled up with all these other feelings. And I thought that was a really interesting examination. However, as the book continued and it went on, I feel like it was much more about the two girls finding each other than it was them really examining what their dad did. Because as the book goes on, you find out that different people in their family had different levels of knowledge about what his situation was, and different lies kind of unravel, and before we get the full truth of what exactly happened and how they got into being in this situation. But I really don't feel like either of them properly reckoned with their father. And at the end, there's quite a lot of interesting ideas about women and women's place, like in the Dominican Republic, and whether they are kind of at risk of men there, and the kind of life the other daughter had in New York and the different opportunities between the two girls. And then I feel like right at the end, there was so much packed in about kind of women looking out for each other and how they're at the mercy of men. And yet I don't feel like either of them really kind of acknowledged the fact that their dad was one of those men. So it seemed a little bit... The thing is, I really wish I could remember enough probably to give you a full review of how I felt about that, but there was just something at the end of the book which left me feeling a little bit like, oh, that's a shame. And I would love to hear from you if you've read this, because I know this was very popular when it came out, and lots of people had lots of feelings about it, so I'd like to discuss this more. And please correct me as well if I've got something wrong. Next one I read for my Patreon book club, which was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, and this was a great shout. I'd never read any Agatha Christie, so I'm really pleased that my patrons chose this. But this is 10 people who are drawn to an island for some kind of reason, and then as time goes on they start getting murdered one by one. They learn as soon as they get to the island that they've all been brought there because to be held accountable for something in their past, and they're trying to work out which one of them is the murderer. It doesn't seem to be anyone else but the 10 of them on the island. So it was a very interesting version of a whodunit. I found it read very quickly, considering there was 10 characters. I found that I got to know them really well, like straight away. I feel like the way she introduced the characters was very good, and they were all despicable in their own ways, but just in a very English way. Like it was very like, a very polite kind of rudeness that they all exhibited. And this is the first time I think I've realised what people mean when they talk about maybe a cosy murder mystery, because this did feel quite cosy, considering it was quite scary, like the idea of being in this deserted house with a murderer running around. But there was just something so English and old-fashioned and nice about it that, yeah, I enjoyed it. Next, another book I was disappointed by, and actually I feel like the majority of these books is weighing towards disappointment, but maybe that's just the mood I've been in, to be fair. And that was Transcendent Kingdom by Ariadne. And this just, no. I absolutely loved Homegoing, and I was so excited to read this book. But Homegoing, I suppose, was a bit of an experiment in terms of jumping generationally and sort of looking about how the slave trade kind of ripples and reverberates into the modern day. So, you know, that was kind of a high concept novel in a way, and this is much more, you know, just one person. It's dealing with lots of different themes, but it's a very different structure. And I certainly couldn't expect Ariadne to write in exactly the same way as she did in Homegoing. But there was something about this that I just found really cold. It's about a woman who is dealing with, I think her brother has died of addiction, and her mother is sort of dealing with grief and depression. And she is at the same time studying mice. Like, she works in a lab and she's working out what drives addictive behaviour. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of the themes she was picking out on addiction, and then also the kind of immigrant experience in the US, because her mother and father came over. I hope I'm remembering this right, but I think they came over from Ghana, and talking about those different experiences growing up black in the US, and I guess the daughter of immigrants in the US, as opposed to what it would have been like living in Ghana, perhaps. There was lots of things in there which I thought was really good, but I just found it really boring, and I can't really explain or remember why, but it just left me feeling a little bit cold, and I perhaps it was too precise, perhaps I could see what she was trying to explore in the writing more than I got lost in the characters. I don't know, but I found this quite disappointing, and I know it has since appeared on lots of like shortlists and things like that, and I have been so out of the loop. I haven't even like watched a booktube video since I had my baby, so I don't know what other people say about this, but again, I'd love to hear what your thoughts were on it. Another book, and another one I have issues with. Will I ever enjoy a book again? Let's see. And that's Chuggy Bane by Douglas... What's his name? Douglas Stewart. And yeah, this was fine. I don't know why this won the Man Booker Prize. Like, I could not tell you. It's okay, but it's not like life-shattering. I never would have put this up if this hadn't been a pick for my local book club, so I'm really glad I did, and it's fine. It's about a young boy called Chuggy who is growing up in, I think Glasgow is where it is, or the outskirts of Glasgow, and his mother is an alcoholic, and it's really about their relationship, but it's about his brother and sister as well, and his father, and kind of just growing up very poor. And you know, what that's like, especially dealing with addiction as well. And a lot of this is based on Douglas Stewart's own life, own childhood. And the thing I found really interesting about that is that he created some characters that were fictionalized and some characters that were really based on his actual family. So I think he didn't have a dad, for example, growing up, but there is a dad in the book, something like that. But the portrayal of Chuggy's mother, I really felt like fell very, very short, considering she was presumably based on his actual mother, his relationship with his actual mother. I felt like I didn't know her at all. And I found it really interesting the way the book kind of portrayed her being an alcoholic and then gave a reason for her being an alcoholic as her parents being like, oh yeah, well, we spoiled her when she was young, that's why she's an alcoholic. And I understand that addiction can't be like explained, but I really feel like we never saw her. I never understood her interior motives, and there were some scenes from her and Chuggy's dad when they got together and she just drank, and it didn't feel like there was a clear path between the young girl she was and the adult alcoholic she became. I didn't understand that path. I didn't understand what she actually really wanted in life, and I wonder if this is because Chuggy doesn't understand that, so he just is showing us how he sees her. But then from a novel, I need more. Like, as a reader, I need to understand that. And I feel like all the other characters that perhaps came out of Douglas Stewart's head, I did feel like I understood their motivations, like when they did things. It was just her that she just felt very unobtainable to me. And perhaps that's the point of the book, I don't know. But I just thought it was okay. And the issue I have with it winning the Booker Prize is it feels a bit like poverty porn. Like, I don't really understand why. There's nothing in the writing I felt that was really outstanding, and considering I didn't feel like the characters were that well developed, I don't really see how it won. Oh, I found a book I enjoyed, you'll be pleased to hear, and that was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This book was just off its rocker. I did not know what to expect, and even what happened, I was just like, what? So this is about a man who is trapped in this huge hall. It's like a series of rooms and corridors and floors and levels. And within this humongous house, which is presumably never ending, a bit like a labyrinth, there's weather and tides and lots of statues. And Piranesi is this guy who just lives there, and he's decoded all the statues, he's decoded the tides, and he's just living there, like fishing, and it's so bizarre. And the way it's written is like his diary, but you're sort of jumping in at a point where he's already like descended into madness. So that's where you begin, and you're trying to piece back together like what happened, like how he's there, what his memories are. There's another man in the house as well. Just he calls him the other, and he sometimes interacts with Piranesi, but he's not there all the time, so who's he? And I really can't say much more than that without explaining what it is. I mean, even after reading it, I'm like, I still don't really know what this was. But I did think it was like astounding how she created the atmosphere. Like, I felt like I could smell the water in the halls, and I could just feel the chill and like the sounds of footsteps and the echoes. And yeah, for some reason I thought when they said a house, I just imagined like an actual old rickety house, and perhaps around every door there'd be magic or something. But it's almost like a neoclassical estate or something. That's how I imagine it anyway, like really huge vaulted ceilings and pillars and classical statues. That's what it sounds like as you're reading it. And yeah, I thought it was amazing, and it would make a really good like weird BBC miniseries, like a Christmas special, like a two or three episode series. I feel like would be really good, because you could make it so beautiful. I do think with anything fantastical, at the end when you like find out what's going on, it's always a bit like okay. I don't think there's really a major twist, and it sort of makes you think, okay, I don't really understand this, but fine, I'll go with it. So I'm not sure it's really explained to you at the end. Maybe it doesn't need to be, but I did really enjoy the ride nonetheless. Next we have Love in Colour by Bolu Babalola, and this is a collection of short stories, and they're all love stories, and most of them are retellings of sort of legends and myths from around the world, and a couple in here are that Bolo Babalola has written herself. And this was fine. I remember a few of them. I don't remember all of them. They've been reimagined in different ways. So the one that I know the best is sort of a Greek mythological retelling, and that has been brought to modern day, and they're all working in a magazine, and I think it might be like Olympus magazine and things like that. So that one's been brought to modern day, but different stories are told in different times, different eras, and they're kind of reimagined in different ways. And I really liked it. I liked that there was some myths and legends in there from cultures that I'd never heard of. The stories, I mean. So that was great. And it's just nice because there's lots of like happy endings and stuff in here. And not all of them, but they're just nice stories for the most part. I think with a collection like this, it got to feel quite samey, like as you went through, but I definitely would recommend this for like dipping in and out of. I have a couple more good ones to talk to you about, but I have a book that I really didn't like, and I'm just going to talk about that really quickly because I didn't want to end on it, and that's Ariadne by Jennifer Saint, and this, as you can see, is an arc, and this is a retelling of Ariadne, retelling of Theseus and the Minotaur from Ariadne's perspective. So Ariadne is Princess of Crete. She falls in love with Theseus and gives him the string, I think, to get him out of the labyrinth. I cannot tell you because I could not read it. It is so bad, and I feel really bad doing this, especially when I get sent. I got sent this. This was unsolicited. This just arrived in my house one day, and I thought it would be really like fun and an easy read, especially when I had a baby. And I was like, oh, I'll just read a Greek retelling, lovely. And the amount of exposition, I just cannot tell you. If I wanted to just read the myth of the Minotaur, I would have just read it. There always has to be some amount of world building, and I do accept a little bit of exposition, like when people are going, well, what about Zeus, the king of the gods? What would he say about that? It's like, oh, okay, I know who Zeus is, thank you. And that's, the dialogue was a little bit unrealistic, but it was just the point when Ariadne met Theseus. We just get like a whole chapter where she's like, Theseus told me how he had got here. He told me how this happened with his mum, and then he did this, and then he did this. And as he told me about that, I was shocked to hear how he had done this, and he had done that. And then he got on the boat, and now he's here in Crete. And I just thought, well, that is a waste of time. Like, I don't need Theseus's backstory, or you need to show it to me. I can't be reading a retelling from Ariadne's perspective, and then you just give me chapters of Ariadne just reading me the story of Theseus, like as he told it to her, without even actually showing me the dialogue between them. Just, he told me, line. Oh, no, so sloppy. And yeah, I'm really sorry. I mean, this is probably not even a book anyone's heard of. I hadn't heard of it until it arrived at my door. I've not seen it like on shelves. Not that I've been to a bookshop, but I've not seen it on like anyone's Instagram or anything. That's the only place books exist. But I just felt like I had to say it was bad, so just in case you saw it. And finally, two that I did quite enjoy, and the first one was Hot Stew by Fiona Mosley. I read Elmet when it first came out a few years ago, and I thought it was fine, but I really enjoyed Hot Stew. And this again was one for my my local book club, and this was such an interesting one to talk about because I really enjoyed it, and a lot of the other women didn't. So I will give you all of our views. This is a story with many parts and many people, and it centres around a brothel in Soho in London, and we are getting perspectives from prostitutes who work there, some of the punters, the woman who owns the building, some of the people who, like friends of people, everyone's who kind of linked. And the reason I was really enjoying it at first is because it felt very cinematic, and there's all these different characters, and you were sort of floating between them, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting, how are they all going to link up? And really it's about sex work in any form of sex work you can think of. So there's one character who was a very, very young Russian, I don't know what she was, perhaps a pole dancer or something, and she marries this very old, very rich man. So we have that kind of gold digging aspect, and then it's her daughter, and people who actually engage in sex work in a very obvious way. There's a guy who's an actor, who has to portray a brothel owner, like in a TV series. So there's quite a lot going on. Some of it I felt was Like, actually, I told you I enjoyed this. Now I'm remembering it. Some of it was very, like, unnecessary. Like, it kind of went too far with some characters and didn't quite sort of, in a way, just wasn't necessary. There were some stories that didn't add anything to the general melee. But a lot of it I did like. I liked the fact we were looking at different forms of sex work and how power sort of invites that. And if you are rich and you have power, if you have money, you are able to kind of hold that power in a sexual way over lots of different people. That's what I came away with from reading it. And I think this is one of the first books where I just felt like I could really engage with it, because especially when I just had Edith, I was, just breastfeeding a lot and I was very tired and I couldn't really focus on a lot of things. And because this was moving from characters, it was so readable. I really enjoyed it. It was only really right at the end where I thought, oh, okay, this hasn't really gone anywhere. Like, you set up all these characters and at the end it was like, oh, there. But I enjoyed the process. Some of the other people in my book club just thought it was like, one of the women said she thought it was like a bad film and that everyone was a caricature. And yeah, perhaps it was. But I just think I enjoyed the ride. So that's a bit of maybe quite a balanced view there. Again, would be interested if anyone has read it. And finally, I read Unsettled Ground by Claire Fuller, which again, I think was for my Patreon book club, which is good. Everyone who supports me on Patreon has been so patient with me. Like, I really appreciate it. I obviously have not been reading at the speed that I normally would, and I've not been posting on Patreon as much as I normally would, or would normally hope to at least. I've not been very on it. But they've been great sports, and we've been sort of doing the book club anyway, even while I've been having a break from the main channel. And yeah, this is about two twins who are in their 50s. They live with their mother dies, and I guess this just creates an absolute avalanche of all these issues that their mother had been hiding. They don't have any money, they need to pay rent on their cottage, and they don't know where their mother's put the money, and I don't know if neither of them can, but certainly one of them can't read, and they've never really had a proper job, and then they don't know what to do. And this was very well written. I just found it it's very good. I can see exactly what Claire Fuller's done, and I really admire it and appreciate it. But I personally found it so frustrating because these characters just wouldn't ask for help, and it's getting to a point where they were like, oh well, I guess we'll be homeless then. And I was like, but just ask for help. You need help, don't you? So just admit you need some help and you'll be okay. That's how I felt. I just found it very frustrating. And a lot of the people in the village were really taking advantage of them in ways that I guess it must happen, but it did feel like there wasn't a single nice person that they knew or that really existed in the village. No one wanted to help them. People were trying to sort of tease money out of them when they didn't have any money anyway. Like, it was quite clear they were struggling, and people were trying to get them to pay more than they needed to for things and get one over on them. And I don't know, I just felt really icky at the end of it. I was like, oh, this is just really sad. But the fact I had such a response to it, I feel like is the result of the writing. And yeah, I was very impressed by it. I found it very readable. I just personally found the characters' situations very frustrating and unsettling. So there we go. I think this video is probably so long. I expected to kind of rattle through these a bit quicker than I have done. But yes, that's good. That's the first review I've done in, I want to say, 10 months, something like that. So I guess I can still do it. That's good. That's good to know. Let's have a chat in the comments, and I would love to hear what you would recommend, especially new releases. What are you really excited to read soon? Because I just don't know. I haven't been in a bookshop. I've not been paying attention to what other people are reading. I have a pile of books that I happen to have, so I guess I will just read some of those. But I would love to get excited about some books that are coming out. So please leave me some recommendations. I would really love that, and I'll see you next time. Bye.